Um, One moment, just dealing with a couple of things on the drive here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited, of course, the Office of the Assessor-Recorder to be here today with HERA, Housing Economic Rights Advocates, to launch our new estate planning program together with them to ensure that we can provide an understanding of estate plans, break down the components of estate plans, and discuss this new program that we're promoting, and to share the need of such programs. As many of you know, estate plans are a core component of financial health, and they also ensure a very smooth transfer of assets, which is a benefit to everyone. May we see the slides, please? Thank you. So what we're going to do, if I can see the next slide, please. So just to kind of give you a quick overview, I'll present first. HERA will present second. I'll provide a general overview of the partnership in the program, as well as some background on my office and how this program that we're announcing today complements the core work that we do, bringing resources into our communities and strengthening people's financial resiliency. Next slide, please. So the responsibilities for our office breaks down really into a few core areas. The majority of our staff is focused on the identifying, discovering, and assessing all real property in the city and county of San Francisco. And then, of course, on our recorder side, which is the official record keeper for our county. We also review and grant exemptions as we are provided to by law. And usually it's about $20 billion in exemptions just last year alone, benefiting nonprofits, schools, veterans, individual homeowners, and many others. Next slide, please. Our city has hundreds of sources of revenues, everything from fees to play at municipal golf courses, federal funding, state funding, what we receive for CalWorks, and business taxes, which is and property taxes, which is where we focus most in our office. And as you can see from this slide, property tax is responsible for nearly 1/3 of general fund sources, providing overall about $3.7 billion to local services and public education. About 64% of that funds the general fund budget, and the remaining portion of that supports the school district, community colleges, Bay Area Rapid Transit, BART, and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and some other entities as well. Next slide. Well, we're here to talk today about how this program is part of my community engagement work. In addition to the core work that I just discussed, I'm very much focused on keeping my office connected to community, which is why I've asked you to come today to hear about this program, to help us get the word out. We are seeking to meet people where they are at, expand our impact in underserved communities. And one way that we do this is when we collaborate with community-based organizations and associations, and then create customized educational presentations, workshops, and collateral to answer frequently asked questions that people bring on a day-to-day basis, to demystify the property tax policies and related personal finance topics. We take this work across the city, and we spearhead new programs like our estate plan program so that we can meet constituents where they are. Next slide, please. So some examples of that are in these three areas, of which this estate planning program is a part. Being in the neighborhoods. My Assessor in the Neighborhood program, in last year alone, we attended over 131 community meetings, street fairs, cultural celebrations, workshops, so that we could hear from community, understand their needs, and then we could answer questions in partnership with local nonprofits like HERA, who's joining us today. And then to make our office more accessible, we pop up once a month at our neighborhood libraries, and we provide office hours there so people can reach out to us, meet us in person. We can troubleshoot issues, answer questions in person and as well online. Property tax education. There are so many complicated tax issues, and property owners often have quite a lot of questions and anxiety surrounding how to engage with our office and also around changes to the law. So we customize our presentations to educate the public and to provide better understanding around the exemption process. For faith-based organizations, for example, we partnered with the Interfaith Council to have a presentation with over 200 attendees. We hosted 7 Proposition 19 educational presentations throughout last year with over 284 attendees. And then we had our annual welfare exemption workshop that we just hosted last month with over 85 attendees, representing 71 nonprofits, which is up from the number of people that we had last year, 77 attendees and 50 nonprofits. Which brings us to our Family Wealth Series, which extends our outreach with a focus on financial security and literacy. We expanded this series in response to community members asking for more financial guidance. So my predecessor, Carmen Chu, began a Family Wealth Forum. We took advantage of the digital needs and access that people had to have throughout this pandemic and expanded that workshop to a series that we could provide to the public. For many first-time buyers and homeowners, their most valuable asset is their home, and we want to help them take care of it and protect it. So we've seen an interest in this series. Just last July, the Family Wealth Series had over 1,100 viewers for our 4-part workshop, Financial Foundation for Homeowners, 100 questions that we answered live. We discussed Property Tax 101, Proposition 19, Personal Finance for first-time home buyers and homeowners, and Estate Planning 101, which are the keystones for financial foundations and resiliency for our community members. Key program partners that we had were, of course, HERA, the San Francisco Public Library, Mission Asset Fund, Northeast Federal Credit Union, Mission Economic Development Agency, and as I mentioned, Housing and Economic Rights Advocates, HERA. So we saw that high turnout and the positive response from our attendees that they were a clear indication that more was needed to share information, provide more resources, and that's what brings us to our announcement today around estate planning. So estate planning is an effective way to ensure that our families and our communities can preserve those hard-earned assets, their home, and other assets, and use them as a basis for building intergenerational wealth. On a community level, estate planning is an underutilized tool to address the disparities in home ownership and inheritance, most specifically seen within communities of color. So estate plans consist of 4 documents: a will, a living trust, a power of attorney, healthcare directives. And what we're doing here is we're expanding on this pillar. And we're going to Southeastern communities to recruit them to participate in estate planning. And we're seeking to provide these plans for 100 participants, either at free of cost or significantly reduced cost, depending on income level, and assure that households that they have their estate plan for their family, for themselves, so that all of their assets can be secured in the event of their death or the incapacity to make these decisions. And we're very, very grateful that we're able to pursue this partnership today. As you can see here, there is an absolute need based on some of the comments we've seen nationally, most specifically in communities of color, that are without these plans. And again, when we care about pursuing intergenerational wealth and ensuring that the desires of homeowners and family members can be realized, an estate plan is an essential part of that process. Next slide, please. So the program here, we're providing 100 free estate plan services for low income and moderate income households. Again, that range of free to a $400 value. Typically, these estate plans can cost $3,000 to $3,500, depending on your assets and also on the group that you're doing work with. So we're saving people thousands of dollars by making this available to them. The program is going to be running for 18 months. We'll be partnering with HERA to reach constituents over the period in the coming weeks. I'll provide some of that information at the very next couple of slides. And these workshops will happen in partnership with our supervisors, in which the neighborhoods that they represent are, in addition to community-based organizations to help us get the word out. Tonight, for example, we're promoting the program online in partnership with President Shaman Walton and the San Francisco Housing Development Corporation, as well as the San Francisco African American Arts and Cultural District. Next slide, please. So by focusing on the southeast part of the city, neighborhoods like the Bayview, the Portola, the Excelsior, Ocean View, we're focusing on serving low-income and multilingual households and immigrant households. HERA uses income levels so that we can determine where those cutoffs are, and we want to be sure that we can serve these families as appropriate at the costs that make this program accessible to them. Next slide, please. So as you'll see here, these two slides just basically show home ownership rates across the city, and then also where the highest concentrations exist in the city and county of San Francisco for communities of color. We want to be sure that we're focusing our work in this way, and you can see in this map that by focusing on the southeast part of the city, we're aligning what we see on both of these two maps to ensure that we're reaching people where the need is. Next slide, please. So here's a preview of the outreach schedule where we're going to be taking our message in the first few months of this year to be sure that we are focusing and partnering with people in as many different areas as we possibly can so that we can realize the goals of this effort. 100 estate plans, free and or cost accessible for moderate income households. We're welcoming all ages and residents within the southeastern part of the city. And the partnership with HERA is essential because they are culturally competent, culturally diverse staff who understand the needs of our communities and can provide translation services as well. Next slide, please. So with that, I just want to say thank you and hand it over to HERA to provide the next details about the program.
Thank you so much, Assessor Torres. I'm Kendra Bowen, and I'm very happy to be here and to be partnering with Assessor Torres and his team with this wonderful project. A little bit about HERA, as Assessor Torres says, it's the Housing and Economic Rights Advocates, a mouthful, but essentially it's a nonprofit legal service organization which helps all people avoid economic abuses, especially in the realm of housing. So as you can imagine, it's a team of attorneys who help people with foreclosure prevention, mortgage debt problems. And what our attorneys at HERA were finding years ago prior to establishing an estate planning department is that if a client became incapacitated while an attorney was working with that client, there wouldn't be someone to stand in that client's shoes to represent that client and continue the good work, perhaps a foreclosure prevention, refinancing project, something like that, that would really help the client. They were also finding that, let's say the attorney and the client were working and had saved the family home. If that client passed away and if some work was imminent and needed to be done, if there was not an estate plan in place, there was a title problem. No one could represent the estate. So within 6 to 9 months, the family would lose the home because probate typically is not finished in 6 to 9 months. So hence they decided to start an estate planning department. I'll start with a success story. So I have one client in San Francisco. I'll call her Client I, a wonderful woman. She was widowed and had no children. She was 88 years old when I met with her, completely competent, knew what she wanted to do, very much trusted this one grandniece of hers. As she lost capacity, she had made it very clearly known in her estate planning documents that she wanted the final stage of her life to be in her home. And when it was time for her to pass away, she wanted to do so in her home. One grandnephew thought he could step in and tell Client I what to do, but because Client I had in her properly executed estate planning documents indicated that a certain grandniece with whom she was close had the authority to determine where she was going to be during that final stage of life, Irma's intentions were carried out and Irma was able to pass away gracefully in her home as she had wanted. When she passed away, Client I wanted assets to go to 2 grandnieces. One grandnephew moved into her house, and because Client I had documents in place indicating where she wanted her assets to go, the grandniece in charge of that was able to say keep those assets. The certain individual had to leave the house, and her estate was distributed according to her wishes. So that's what estate planning is all about, as Assessor Torres mentioned. It's about making sure that we have a plan in place for when we pass away, and that we're appointing someone to make that plan eventually happen. But it also covers incapacitation. What happens if we're just in a bike accident and we're down for several months and we need someone to pay our bills, finish filing our taxes, represent us with a government entity? We need documents in place to make sure that we have the proper people there to represent our interests in the best manner. Next slide, please. So estate planning is a process, and it involves the people in your life and your things, your stuff, your estate. It addresses future needs. So we create the documents now while we're feeling good, so that they are there when life is taking a turn. It covers incapacitation. It also covers where we want our things, our estate to go when we pass away. And while a will is part of this process, for homeowners, often a will not be enough. Also, keep in mind that when I have clients who have executed a will, wills don't cover incapacitation. So for instance, in client I's scenario, having a will would not have helped her, because you need documents like a power of attorney and healthcare directive in place to make sure that your intentions are carried out. If you can't effectively communicate, you will hopefully have someone in place to do so for you in your best interest. Next slide. So this illustrates the types of documents that we anticipate doing for all of these wonderful folks. So the documents in blue are going to be a durable power of attorney. It covers who is going to pay someone's bills for them, who is going to represent them with a governmental entity, who is going to represent them in a lawsuit. In a similar vein, the document at the bottom in the blue is an advanced healthcare directive. If doctors could not effectively communicate with the client, if a client has completed an advanced healthcare directive, that agent can receive medical information from a physician or a medical team and can make sure that that client's intentions are carried out with respect to any medical treatment. A trust, a revocable trust, is often needed for people who own a home. In California, if you own assets where the gross value of those assets exceed $166,250, which is basically a home in California, in any county, frankly, there could be a probate when someone passes away. And that's a process we really want to avoid if all possible. So for homeowners, often creating a trust is appropriate. The documents in the yellow are the documents that really come into effect when people pass away. So as I just indicated, a revocable trust, a trust that was revocable when someone's alive and becomes irrevocable when they pass away, that can distribute wealth when someone passes away without probate, if funded appropriately. And then a last will and testament can be appropriate if people are under that high threshold amount of $166,250 and can distribute assets for those folks too. Next slide. So the documents that I just went over are the documents that we hope to prepare for individuals and families in the areas that Assessor Torres mentioned. So we need estate planning, and all of our clients need estate planning because there's a chance that they could become incapacitated and need someone to stand in their shoes to help make good decisions for them while they're down. And we also want to, of course, do post-death planning because we want to avoid the probate process, which is lengthy. Typically, a lawyer needs to be hired. Someone like me would be hired to help a family go through probate if a trust was not in place. So we want to avoid probate if we can. Next slide. Probate is the court supervised process for transferring an estate to beneficiaries named in a will or according to a succession plan that the state has if someone does not even have a will. And basically the court appoints someone to take heirs through that process once someone passes away. Once again, we want to avoid this because going through probate is lengthy. It typically takes a year and a day. It often requires hiring an attorney. It is public because even if someone has a will, with probate, a will is filed. If someone has taken the time to create a trust, and let's say put a home into a trust, when that client passes on, that trust is not filed. So it's a much more private process. Probate is expensive as well. You're paying the court, an attorney, and a personal representative to go through the distribution of an estate, where when you create a trust and avoid probate, it's really more of a private family administration, and it just takes much less time and doesn't cost as much as a probate. Next slide. So the interesting thing about calculating probate fees, and keep in mind that the fees are now statutory, which kind of lets us know that perhaps attorneys back in the day were charging more than this, and the state had to put a cap on this. So if we have a client in one of these neighborhoods who owns a home worth $500,000, $500,000, and let's say that home has a mortgage against it of $400,000, the equity there is $100,000. If that person passes away, the probate fee is not calculated on that $100,000 of equity there, but rather that probate fee is calculated on the gross value of that estate, $500,000, which exceeds that $166,000, $250 figure. So the fees for this family to go through probate and distribute this house, and let's assume that's the only asset here, would be $26,000, because $13,000 would go to the attorney handling this, and $13,000 would go to the personal representative here. We really want to save families money. $26,000 is a lot of money, and these fees frankly don't include tax prep fees, paralegal fees, probate referee fees, any kind of extraordinary litigation here. So we want to help families save money and really eliminate the emotional costs as well of going through a probate process. And that's what the documents that we prepare will help families do. Next slide. Okay, so we want to avoid probate. We want to help these families avoid probate. We want to also cover instances of incapacity. If a client is incapacitated and has the proper documents in place, it will be very clear what that person wants for him or herself in a medical setting. If an individual is elderly, they might not want a lot of things done if they have an irreversible condition. They might not want a lot of intrusive things done to them. If they have that in writing in a notarized document and have nominated an agent who is expected to carry out that wishes, that person has peace of mind knowing that things will not be done to them that they wouldn't have approved of. Okay, so all of the estate plan documents are going to typically include a healthcare directive, durable power of attorney. Those documents govern what would happen if someone's incapacitated. And then we have the post-death documents, which are going to typically be a will and perhaps a revocable trust. And then the other thing we're going to help people do is properly fund the trust if we do create a trust for them. And typically that means preparing a grant deed so that they will thereafter own their home as trustee of their trust, and they still completely own the home. They can sell it, spend it, move to Tahiti. There are no restrictions when people own property or assets in a trust. Sometimes there are other ways to avoid probate. So sometimes it can involve, let's say, a transfer on death deed, where someone's indicated a beneficiary on a deed and filed that properly. Sometimes with respect to retirement accounts and other financial assets, it could be a matter of putting beneficiaries on those assets, POD designations, pay on death designees. So that's what we hope to do for people, help them implement ways to avoid probate and to keep that wealth within their families. So when people decide to take us up on this wonderful offer through this project, we're going to let people know that the first thing that they'll do is meet with an estate planning attorney. I have a couple of colleagues, and we love meeting with clients in person if we can. Lately, of course, we've been doing so virtually. If it's a married couple, we always want to meet with both of them to make sure that they're both on the same page. Typically, clients will then provide some kind of personal information, legal names of themselves, their children, their spouse. A ballpark of financial information. We certainly don't want clients' social security numbers or account numbers, but we just need to get a sense of what they have so that we can let them know whether they need to create a trust or perhaps put beneficiaries down on assets. The attorney will then prepare drafts and send them to the clients. The attorney will discuss the drafts with the clients and make any changes that are needed in those documents so that the documents properly reflect what that client wants to have happen one day in the event that they're incapacitated or when they pass on one day. Once those documents clearly reflect what the clients want, we are going to have the clients execute the estate planning documents. Wills and trusts are typically quite formal, so everything's signed with the notary or with disinterested witnesses. So we help clients implement that and get that done. The day that they're signed, they're in effect. We do follow up with them, though, to help them retitle their assets appropriately. So if they were a homeowner, they would have signed a grant deed conveying their asset, their home, to their trust, and we will typically file that for them. And with any bank account that they have, they will typically carry out that retitling work on their own. And of course, we'll encourage them to update their beneficiary designations on any life insurance or retirement accounts that they have. If we do create a trust for a homeowner, we're going to remind them to properly fund their trust because that's a big part of the estate planning process. And then we always encourage people to review the estate planning periodically. Family dynamics might change, and our rule of thumb is that we do encourage people to review their estate planning decisions every 2 or 3 years or so. Pull out that big estate planning binder and look it over and make sure it's still accurate. It really reflects what we would like to have happen. So I think we're open to questions. Again, we're very excited to do this. Hopefully everyone's picked up the fact that everyone needs some type of estate planning. It's not just something for people who have a lot of assets. If you have any interest in anything, it's important to at least have a will or trust. And then all of us need the other estate planning documents, power of attorney, and healthcare directive documents.
Thank you so much, Kendra.
Welcome.
And thank you, Assessor Joaquín Torres, for your presentation as well. We have some minutes left over on this, and if you members of the press have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. And I'm happy to read those. Please let me know who that question is dedicated to answer.
So just again, the big highlights are estate planning services being provided for free or low cost, depending on income level. Focusing these services in the southeast part of the city, which aligns with where we see the need being and the concentration of communities of color in this part of the city to ensure that those homeowners have access to these affordable programs. And it's an expansion that we're excited to do together with HERA. To make sure that people take advantage of this and realize that planning now can prevent devastating impacts later on in the future. So by working at a free cost today, saving thousands of dollars through the costing of this program, they can ensure that their dreams can be fulfilled for the future.
I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think we can wrap up this meeting.
That sounds great.
Thank you both, Assessor-Recorder Joaquín Torres and Kendra of HERA for your time today in this presentation. Please feel free to email myself or Kenneth if you have any follow-up questions that you need answered. We look forward to helping you out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kendra.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll see you. Are you joining us tonight, Kendra?
I am, yes.
Great. All right, I'll see you
Great.
tonight. All right.
Okay, good.
Ciao.